Welcome to the Happy Whole You podcast. My name is Heather Laganelli, and I'm here with Delphi, a very special guest of ours. And I'm really excited to talk with her today because she happens to be my cousin. So I've had the
Mhm.
privilege of getting to know her for my entire life and and hers. And I'd
Mhm.
love to have you introduce yourself if you can.
Yeah, so my name is Delphi, and I am a licensed massage therapist specializing in holistic therapies for women, and I'm also a folk herbalist. I also live in an off grid eco village with my husband and our blended family, and I'm a mother of four.
So many
Mm,
things. We wanted to chat
Really.
today specifically because I feel like the life that you have lived is phenomenal and so
Mm,
intriguing to me. And I feel like there's a lot of value in sharing the life experience that you've had with others so that people can learn more about themselves, specifically women. I feel like women in general, the things that whenever I talk to you, I always am learning something. And I'm like, man, this would be so great for other people to be able to benefit from your knowledge and your work and your wisdom.
mhm.
And I'm
Thank
curious to
you.
see, like, you're welcome. I'm curious to see maybe if you could kind of like lead us down the path of how you chose into this field.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's many places where I could start, but I would say that really it was probably with my first pregnancy in 2006. I just had no idea what birth could look like, what pregnancy could look like. And I didn't know the ins and outs of the field, the midwifery field, the OBGYN field, and I really got burst wide open through that pregnancy and then that birth. And then afterwards, I became a doula and a childbirth educator. And I just loved helping women, supporting them through breastfeeding. And I started working with placentas and really enjoyed that and did that for about 5 years. And kind of when I outgrew breastfeeding and didn't think I was at the point where I wanted to have more children, my life kind of shifted and I wanted to live closer to nature and started researching eco villages and different farms and opportunities to live closer to the land and learn skills that I felt were necessary for these times. So in 2013, I sold all of my birth work stuff, like everything, and decided to move to an eco village in Western North Carolina in the Appalachians. And I was pretty raw at that time, like super green, living in community in a forested off grid eco village with my daughter, who was 6 then. And I didn't know where life was going to take me. I loved working with women, but I needed to get down to my roots first. And so I did that. And I was just kind of like in outer space for a little while of like not knowing and feeling really confused and didn't know what my purpose was and feeling really purposeless. And then when I conceived my son in 2015, I felt such a strong intuition telling me to go to massage school so I could study my abdominal therapy, which I didn't know many people going into the field to study that, but I listened to the instructions that I received and started massage school when I was 20 weeks pregnant with my son and graduated after he was born. And it was just a really big stepping stone for me to then, like, after learning Mayan abdominal therapy, learning other ways of traditional uterine massage, and then fertility awareness method, and it was just like one door after the other kept opening in the field of holistic women's care and how to empower women with the tools that I never had. And definitely through my postpartum period with my son, I didn't quite know what it was going to look like. It was the early stages of embarking into this field, and I remember just praying a lot when I would take walks with him and the stillness that happens after having a baby, and I would pray and I would receive these downloads of like experiences that I had as a young girl. I remember the first time I got my period, and I had told one of my aunts when I was living with her aunt. And so the aunt that I told aunt that I was living with, and she just gave me this like really repulsive look. And I just I just remember so much shame about that rite of passage, and I didn't know. I thought I had to hide it and it was dirty. And so when I would pray and I would get these downloads, then it was almost like a recognition that these experiences were instructions for me to do something differently, to heal that assumption or the conditioning that we have as girls and women when it comes to our reproductive health and our female bodies and the mysteries that they hold.
And what is it that like, if you could tell yourself, if we could go back in time and you could be the voice of your aunt, w what would you have wished you were told?
I wish that I had been told something like, there is a deep power in becoming a woman and a deep responsibility. And I wish that I had been given more scientific understanding of what's on in my body. I wish that the women around had known to say, like, you're a cycling being now, and there's like an internal moon inside of you that you can feel created for because you might not feel like it, and to normalize that instead of thinking that I had to be one way all the time throughout my entire cycle. And then also just, yeah, having more awareness around how pussy happens. And I can't fault my aunt for not sharing that with me because she didn't have that information and she didn't have that wisdom. And it took me probably a decade to recognize that it was nothing personal. The look that she gave me, it was just a really deep internal fear of her own experience of getting pregnant when she was 16. And yeah, maybe the shame that she felt of becoming a woman.
And at that time, I mean, as a grown adult and a woman with lots of experience between the 2 of us, now it's so easy to be like, that wasn't about like, you. It wasn't about who you were at the time. It was about her life experiences, and the things that she had experienced up until that moment. It's fascinating to see, like, what we can make that mean too, as, like, a young, impressionable child.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I was just curious to see what you would have said. So, that was one
Mhm.
part, and you were going on about, you were continuing on from that story about your connection to the womb and womb healing and massaging.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I said, after finishing school, the doors just kept opening and I just followed my passion and dove more deeply into different organ therapies and then learning about the menstrual cycle and learning how to track the menstrual cycle. And so I come from a lineage of women who had a lot of children. Both of my grandmothers had 8 children. My mother had 4 children, and I knew I didn't wanna take hormonal birth control, but after giving birth to my daughter, who's now 6, I realized, like, I need to figure something out, and so I embarked on this whole mysterious journey of learning the menstrual cycle and what happens, and we think the menstrual cycle is for bleeding, but It's really the whole cycle from the beginning of the bleed until the day before we start bleeding again, and these hormones fluctuate and they show signs and symptoms in our body, whether it's the blood through menstruation or cervical fluid through ovulation, our basal body temperature changes, and we can tell when we're fertile, and we're only fertile for, 6 to 8 days of that cycle because leading up to ovulation, the sperm can keep the cervical fluid can keep the sperm alive if an egg there, and then the egg only lives for 24 to 36 hours and then it dies, and then there's a period of infertility after that. And so just learning that there are these codes embedded in each one of us and that we don't have to fear pregnancy if we are having intercourse during the times when we're not fertile, and then using protection if we decide to have intercourse during the times that we are fertile. And so that was a huge homecoming for me to learn this ancient wisdom that we all have access to, and all you need is a piece of paper and some toilet paper and maybe a thermometer. And it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but once you get the hang of it, like any new habit, it's really life changing.
When I wonder too, like, 'cause by the way, you are cutting out a lot, like, a lot of that was kind of coming and going. I don't know if it's interesting to me to see, like, to just that information is something that has been available to us for a long time. And like our grandparents, like you mentioned on our side that we share, having we have 8 aunts and uncles, or seven aunts and uncles, pretty much.
Mm,
And it's just interesting to me that the choice to have children in such great capacity was still made for so many years, you know?
mhm.
'Cause it's not like this is new information, you know?
No, but if you look at the history, I mean, I'm sure women had this information since the beginning of time, like they probably charted on caves, like through the cycle of the moon, and like they would all bleed together similar around the new moon, because there's just chemical reactions that happen in our body with light and darkness. So many women would cycle at the same time. And so I wonder where this information got lost, whether it was in the witch burnings or colonization, but it did come to fruition again through the Catholic Church.
Mm.
And I think I wanna say that it started becoming more widely known in the '80s, and so the church was using it, they call it natural family planning, and so they had this information for quite a while because even they had the understanding of knowing, like, intercourse is made it's meant to be made with a husband and wife that are wanting to have children, and so they would time their pregnancies because it's not healthy for a woman to have so many pregnancies back to back, and so they would avoid intercourse during the fertile window. Natural family planning and Catholicism didn't support barrier methods, and so it was basically knowing your cycle, and if you don't wanna conceive, then you're only having intercourse during your time not being fertile. And if you're open to conceive, then you can have intercourse as spirit moves you. Mhm.
That's fascinating. And then you had mentioned something that I was curious to hear more about. So when we adjust to our like, because it's for me, I think of people that we work with, that we live with, people when we share community with, it
Mhm.
seems to be common that we adapt to each other. And then as women, like we end up having our cycle around the same time. Like, how does that work? You said it had to do with the moon and light and dark?
Yeah, and so what it is there's the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis. And so when light comes into our pituitary gland, and I'm not like a scientific expert, and but
We have a
you're
disclaimer. We have a
yeah,
disclaimer that, like, any of the conversation that we're having today is just our thoughts and opinions. They're not based on medical field or any kind of level of expertise.
right. And so when the light permeates our pituitary gland, then it releases different hormones. I don't know if it's melatonin or I can't quite remember, but it causes us to essentially like create the hormones that are for ovulation. And so that's why a lot of, like if you're doing a lot of research, you're wanting to get pregnant and you're wanting to optimize your fertility, then a lot of people will say, like, make sure you're sleeping with all of your lights off, your computer lights off. Like, even if your plugs in the walls make lights, like, make sure they're covered, because it affects them rhythm. But then we have the infradian rhythm, the rhythm that's inside of us through our menstrual cycle. So yeah, I mean, your listeners can do their own research, but that's kind of like a bite-sized nugget from what I understand. And so I'm pretty anal about trying to make sure that all of the outlets and all of the lights are all off before I go to sleep. But I do live in a yurt and we have a really big clear dome at the top of our yurt. We've got a loft and our bed is up in the loft, and so we really can't avoid the full moon. The full moon is constantly creeping in, each night when she's out, and it always wakes me up. But I am a new moon bleeder. I pretty much always bleed with the new moon, and I really like that.
That's interesting. So, in your learnings, so I feel like there's so much. Like, there's so many fun things that you've learned over the years. And what would you say that, like, one thing that you would be excited to share with people that maybe they wouldn't know would be?
Oh, one thing. Oh, goodness.
I know
Well,
we talked about magnesium last week, you and I, um, and how most women are deficient in magnesium.
yeah, so many of us are deficient in magnesium, and that, there's lots of ways to take magnesium, but I think the most common way that we all probably take magnesium is by taking Epsom salt baths. And so it's absorbed through the skin and really helps us with relaxation and stress. It can help with menstrual cramps. Um, it can help in lots of different ways. And so that's something that I've incorporated into my medicine making, which is something that I really like to do. I grow my own Tulsi and then I dry it out and infuse
What is that?
it in coconut oil.
What do you grow?
Tulsi.
What is that?
Do you know what Tulsi is?
Mm-mm.
So Tulsi is in the basil family. Her other name is holy basil, and it's really a plant that's, I think, mostly, I think, indigenous to India and planted around the home in India. It's a very sweet smelling plant. Um, yeah, it's I would definitely recommend growing Tulsi if you can, because it's an adaptogen and it helps our bodies adapt to stress. It's a great tea. I love putting the flowers in my smoothies, but also love making magnesium butter, and it's really quite simple to make. You don't have to infuse your own homegrown Tulsi flowers into your coconut oil if you don't want to, but it's just something I like to do. And yeah, I love rubbing that on my children's feet before bed. It just helps to soothe them and relax them. I also love rubbing it over my own feet and my womb, and it it's just very easily absorbed into the skin and helps us relax and sleep better.
And
Magnesium has jobs.
that's a magnesium. that's derived from the plant. So it's like a natural form of magnesium, or
No,
infused with it as well?
so the magnesium that I use is from pure Epsom salts, and so essentially I use the coconut oil, um, organic cocoa butter that I melt down as well, and then I make an it's called a magnesium oil, but it's essentially boiling water with magnesium salts, and then um, those salts dissolve, and then you basically whip it up. It's kind of like cooking in a way, and it becomes a butter, and yeah, it's very decadent, and yeah, like I said, it's great for kids, and it's great for everyone, men, women, children,
You're
if you
gonna
have
say
sore
about
muscles.
the properties. You're gonna say about the properties of magnesium and the, well, healing properties, I guess.
Yeah, again, not a scientific expert, and my brain is a little rusty, and the main things that I use it for is relaxation and sore muscles, but it also it also does a lot of other things that I can't think of right now.
And then I totally interjected and asked you about magnesium, and you were about to talk about your, something that was interesting or unique that you would choose to share with us.
Yeah, well, I guess probably the thing that I if I step out of my life and I look at it from maybe somebody else's perspective, that's really unique is just living in an off-grid eco village. Um, I just felt really drawn to living in nature and slowing down and living a more simple life. And so I know that this is kind of one thing that we talked about the last time we talked about yeah, just going down a different road and not going down the road that maybe society had expected many of us to go down, and we decided to take a different path and move to community, and it was a very slow and long process, and then instead of taking out a bunch of loans or buying a home and having interest in all of that, we decided to build a yurt, and so we live in a yurt now,
Can I
and
just pause you for 1 sec? So I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were like, "What's a yurt?" And I was like, "What?" They were like, "I don't know what a yurt is." I know what a yurt is. However, just for listening perspective, like, can you maybe walk us through, like, what is a yurt and what is the eco community and what does the day look like in your life?
Okay, so a yurt is a round structure that's held up by these really unique lattice, this like lattice structure. And then we have lots of wool for insulation and canvas. And so you can see the lattice and the canvas, and then there's wool, and then there's another piece of canvas on the other side, and we have windows and all of that and a roof and a dome. And from what I understand, like these types of dwellings were started uh, uh
A long time
the places oh
ago.
and the people that created them are nomadic, and so they would, it's sometimes I joke and I say it's like a glorified tent, but it's of course, like, the way that we built it, it wouldn't be easy to be a nomad because it's all built out. We have a bathroom and a full kitchen and a children's room and a loft and all of that, but they were created essentially for these people, to easily move, throughout their nomadic lifestyle, and we decided to build a yurt because we love round structures, and we wanted something that we could get up rather quickly, and it's affordable, and we were able to access a loan through our community because there's a group of about 18 people in the community that get together and they formed what's called the savings pool. So we were able to get a zero interest loan through them. And then my husband did all of the work to build it out.
And
And
the savings
so
pool is just, like, a certain amount that you contribute or something? Like, How does that work?
Every month we get together and people put money into the pool. And so then if you want to take a loan out of the pool, then essentially you write a proposal. And so this group has been going on for probably close to 4 years, and there was, I don't know, maybe $60,000 in there, and some small loans were taken out. Originally, it was created to be a business savings pool to boost the economy in the village of people trying to start small businesses. And then there weren't many businesses getting started, and so I brought a proposal to help us get our yurt, and it was approved, and now we have a yurt, and it's lovely, and I love waking up in the yurt. It's full of light. You can hear the birds chirping, you can hear the rain, and it's a circular structure. It's, like, just so womb-like.
Oh, yeah, I never thought about that. That's so okay, so the savings pool helped you get the yurt, and then you said your husband basically
Mhm.
built out the space, and yeah, and that savings pool is something that the community use for a way for them to advance and to give back, basically, and it's
Yes,
0 interest, which is freaking amazing. High five
totally.
for
Yep, high
that.
five.
Um, that's awesome. And the eco community and your day to day and like what that looks like for you.
Yeah, and so this village was created close to 30 years ago, and it's a little over 300 acres of forested land. We derive our power through water, hydro, and solar. Um, and it's just a beautiful place to raise children, and that's why we love it so much because there are creeks and there are paths and trails and other children. And so a typical day for us in the summertime, like, we're doing our chores, and my husband's part of a pig co-op, and we've got chickens in our neighborhood, and we might be in our garden. The kids love to frolic, and they're at the age now where they can go off and ride their bikes and meet with friends. We love Tuesdays because every Tuesday morning, there's something called coffee hour and trade. And so people in the community get together, and some people are selling the vegetables they grow, or maybe the milk or butter that they make with the cows that they have. And some people make breakfast, and there's pork, and it's just a lovely start to the day.
What's
To
up?
even if you're going to thing, you get to walk through a beautiful forest to connect with other people in your community, and yeah, just create relationships. And then on Tuesday night, there's always a potluck, and there's a grill, and people are grilling meats, and those are for sale. And people are playing frisbee on the village green, and we're just really fortunate. It's kind of like the wholesome childhood that I really want every child to have. They feel safe, they are surrounded by people who know and love them. There are seasonal rituals that are held by a priestess in our village. And so, for solstice and Lammas and Beltane, there's always something going on to bring our awareness to the cycles that are in our natural world, and those holy days that we mistake for holidays that become so consumerist in our culture. And I just love that.
What's a pig co-op?
A pig co-op. Oh, so that's I guess like 6 people got together, and they all wanted pigs, and pigs are kind of a lot of work. And so when more people get together and they can write a proposal to use this land for agriculture and do all of the work together that's needed for pigs, then they can share the responsibilities essentially. And so a few families got together to get pigs and work the land, and they rotate their chores. And so, we have 2 days where we have to go and feed the pigs, and 2 evenings, and then the other days fall on other people for their responsibilities, and then and then, at the end of the pig's life, they're harvested, um, together, and yeah, just essentially the work is shared so that one family doesn't have the responsibility and need so much land to have 1 or 2 pigs, and then you become housebound through animal husbandry, and it's harder to travel and do all the things, and so it's a lot easier to take vacations and have time off from taking care of animals if you don't want that to rest completely on your own shoulders.
That's awesome. And where are you located?
We live in Western North Carolina, um, Black Mountain, and it's called Earth Haven Eco Village, and you can find them online. They do a lot of tours. They do a lot of really special events for people to come and experience what it could be like living in community. So they have experience weeks and retreats and lots of really unique opportunities to really kind of like burst the bubble on people that are living in mainstream modern day America.
I was talking to Dr. Anna Marie, when we were texting with earlier, and she was like, "We need to go and see your cousin." And I was like, "I know,
I would love that.
I know, I know." I'm like, "I want to see her all the time, anyways, so you don't have to tell me twice." Yeah, it's so fascinating to me, and I think it's really is a beautiful thing. I feel like growing up together in Massachusetts and having the ability to explore nature and to be a part of like the seasons and living in California, I feel like there isn't really that for me is not there's still a way to connect with nature in lots of ways. It's just different than it
Mhm,
was for me as a child. And I do feel like blessed in a sense to be able to have had exposure to the land more than I have been maybe in California. I feel like just the layout
mm,
of the nature of the space
mhm,
on the East Coast is so different, and
yeah.
it's I think it's healing, and I know that there's a lot of studies around it and from a energetic perspective, like raising a family in nature. I mean, I can't even fathom what that would feel like. I know for me, living in a city, my air conditioner is out right now and it's
Mhm,
pretty warm and
mhm,
Bakersfield, California. And I was in a hotel for 3 days recently and I felt like kind of a little stir crazy, and it wasn't
mhm,
that I couldn't go outside, like, I had all the ability to do so, just knowing that, like, I couldn't open up a door and just be
mhm.
in the grass somewhere, it felt really limiting to me, and
Yeah.
yeah, what is your experience like with, like, the growth that comes from that, and, like, is there anything that you do on a day-to-day that you're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this is my life?"
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think I take it for granted because I've moved there 11 years ago and I only lived there for a year and a half, and then I moved away and moved back 5 years ago with my husband and family, but it's oftentimes when I leave and I'm, traveling on the highway or going to a retreat or somewhere else and I have to be out in the world or see how things happen, like, and things that I typically did before I moved to an eco village, but then really coming back, it's so resettling and so beautiful to just drive through the forest when I'm coming home and have spring water coming out of my tap, and it's like those simple things of, like, having fresh, clean water and greenery all around me, and yeah, it's just a slowing down of the nervous system, and, of course, living in community changes people because we have to learn new skills to communicate with people in a lot of different ways, and we have to strengthen our boundaries and learn what our boundaries are and how to voice them, and I think living in community, it always brings up the parts of ourselves that need the most work, and it can be extremely triggering at times, and it's not it's not easy, but it's still so yeah, it's been so beneficial for us in a lot of ways, and I know that there were so many times when, we would go to the lake with our family, and I think that was really I only remember doing it once a year in our teen years, and we would just sit by the creek and talk, and I felt so at home and at peace in that space. And then, of course, life took me in different directions, and I moved to New York City, and I was in the rat race, and so now, being so close to nature on the daily, I just sink in with that rhythm of nature, and so I tend to have a little bit of a harder time. I don't have the capacity to be in, fast-paced environments and cities and loud noises and bright lights, and I just notice how much when I'm in those experiences, I just appreciate coming home.
Yeah, yeah. I just I feel like there's so much to it, and it's fascinating to me because I can see the difference in you from when I first met you, and I mean, met you, I can't even say that, it's so funny. I can't when you were a little baby.
Totally.
Uh, from the time that you were young until now, it's wild to see the progression of your life and to have been able to experience it from, like, a outsider's perspective and alongside of you as well, and just to see your happiness and
Mhm,
joy, and when we lived in New Jersey for a summer
mhm,
together, and just the difference in the young adult that was the you then, and then
mhm,
the you now with your family and the life choices that you've made, and kind of just picking you and going against the grain, regardless of what was normalized in society. I feel like that takes a lot of courage and bravery, and
mhm,
I love having conversation with you because I always learn something about something that I wouldn't have. And I feel like even
mhm,
just talking to you last week when you were like telling me about your festival that you attended and you took part in, um,
mhm.
that was just even fascinating in itself too. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, this year I went to Matriarch Rising Festival. It's a radical women's festival held in Western North Carolina. It was my second year going, and last year was super transformational for me. So I was really grateful to be asked to come back as one of the healers in the Healing Sanctuary. And this is a space where almost 300 women come from around the world to be together in ritual and sisterhood and be nourished and learn lots of different ways of caring for themselves, whether it's education around, birth, physiological normal birth. A lot of them are free birthers, so a lot of them are giving birth outside of the medical system at home with no midwife or anybody that's trained or specialized in delivering babies. And so that's really super radical. And yeah, learning about the menstrual cycle and herb walks and rites of passage and womb healing. And so I was just super stoked to be able to go there and work in a beautiful yurt very similar to mine, with other healers and offering womb centered body work. And yeah, the way that the women respond to receiving hands-on work in that space, it just really opens them up and so much moves through them, and just having the safety of being in a container where you are just surrounded by women. There's no male gaze, there are no men, like, there's just there's just women, and there's the judgment falls away, and you can just be together, and so much vulnerability is shared, and the growth that happens is just exponential, and I was feeling so enlivened by that experience, and I just want more of that. Like, I wanna be going to retreats and offering my work to women, because what I find is, like, I do the work that I do, and I've been walking this path for, over a decade if you start from when I became a doula and a mother, but tend to forget that this is a really unique modality that not many women have access to. Not many women are having another woman rub their abdomen, their organs, or their breasts. Not many women are having their breasts touched in a way that's not sexual or a baby wanting milk out of them. And yeah, the women can just really drop into that space, and a lot of transformation happens, and it's really beautiful, and I just feel really grateful to be a part of that.
And then also, can you just explain a little bit about what a doula is?
Yeah, a doula is a woman who is trained to support a woman and her family in the either preconception and pregnancy, birth, and postpartum period. And so they offer educational support, or support during the birth, and then also support in the postpartum period. And so it's not a medical support, it's more just like providing nourishing meals or holding your baby after you give birth so that you can take a shower. There's lots of different types of doulas. There are, birth doulas who will help you through pregnancy and then through birth. And then there are postpartum doulas who help postpartum, which is something that many women are in our culture are very shocked to go through and understand. Like, there's just not that support system that they need after becoming a mother. And then there are also abortion doulas. So those are women that help women through abortions, whether medical abortions, or herbal abortions, or clinical abortions, or at home abortions, and all that.
When you chose into so you said that your path on this healing journey started about 10 years ago. That well, I feel like you've kind of been on this road for a while.
Yeah, I guess probably started in 2006. I
2006.
couldn't and just being, yeah, she was born 7.
I can't hear you.
Oh no, can you hear me now?
Yeah. You said it started in 2006?
I would say that with yeah, becoming pregnant is really when the light turned on
When Veda, right
in
around when Veda was born.
2006.
Yeah, so 18 years of a journey. And
Yeah.
just to like kind of wrap things up, I know that your family is in the background like, "Hey, mom, what are you doing?" Is there anything that you would choose to leave our listeners with? Like maybe a piece of advice or a piece of wisdom or something that you think might be impactful for women to know or people to know in general?
I guess what I would say from what I really gathered from my pregnancy in 2006, and then the birth that we had, which was in the medical system and extremely traumatic, and I would say do research when it comes to really whatever you're embarking on, whether that's is pregnancy or wanting to get pregnant, or moving outside of the norm. Don't just take what society is doing or what the expectations are, at face value. Talk to people who are doing things differently, because there is such a world out there beyond even what I am aware of how to move through life and the systems that have been created in our culture. And yeah, just I would say, I would just say, like, start looking more deeply at the things that take for granted.
Yeah.
That was probably my nugget of wisdom.
I feel like that's
And
so
maybe,
go ahead, and maybe what?
yeah, maybe the other one would be just like recognizing, like, if hypothetically, if somebody is pregnant and it's their first pregnancy and they just think they have to go through the normal routine of like going to the OBGYN and having their baby in a hospital or whatnot, just recognizing that anyone you bring into your field is like you're hiring them and they work for you, and create a care team around you for whatever initiation you're going through, whether it's even menopause or menarche or whatever it is, of recognizing that these people, they're there to support you and they don't have all the answers, like y- the answers are within us, and we have to educate ourselves and know what we want so we can move towards that and align with people who are going to support our vision and values, and not expect people to change what they do to align with what we want. Like if they don't do
That's like a
what
mic
we're
drop. That's literally like drop the mic right there. Look, we don't have to change what we want. Like it this is not new information, and somehow it is. We talk about this often on this podcast. We talk about how a doctor doesn't have all the answers just because they're a doctor and they have that title. Like a teacher doesn't know all of the things. A parent is a person. Like there are so many things out there in our society that we just kind of take it for the face value, or we just take it for what it is. And I think you're a true testament to that. Like you're a true testament to, and me too. Like I feel like between the two of us, we don't just accept whatever it is. We like
Mhm,
put our hearts and souls and with passion into the things that we're passionate about. And I think that's what makes life
mhm,
beautiful, you know?
totally.
I cut you off. I cut
No,
you off because
great.
I felt like you were like, yes, that is it's
Mhm.
150 million% yes. Yes, it is
Yeah,
frustrating. It's frustrating
yeah,
that so many people just accept crap.
mhm. Yeah, and sometimes we have to have that experience to recognize what's at stake for us if we keep allowing other people to dictate our lives. And that's why I just, yeah, like align yourself and surround yourself with people who are doing things more similarly to the ways that you want to be living. And yeah,
Yeah. I have one more question before we go. It's a very
okay.
random one. I was talking to somebody earlier this week about how uh, contraceptives impact our choice in mates. So
Hmm.
if female is, because I know for me, I was on birth control pretty much from the time I was 15. I had the worst periods I remember back then, and that was a norm to just be like, "You will go on ortho-tricycline, like, no big deal."
Hmm.
And I remember it really changed my attitude, my mood, my energy. It was really, like,
Hmm.
a harsh one for me. But then also I transitioned and stayed on it, and then I even had the IUD for a while, and it was the copper one, and at the same time, recently, I heard that being on any of those things can greatly impact the choice that we would make from a reproductive perspective with choosing a partner or a husband. Do you know,
Yeah,
how do you feel about that?
called hormonal birth control, and it's called hormonal birth control because it alters our hormones. The only one that doesn't is the copper IUD, and it works by creating inflammation in the womb and killing the sperm essentially. But all the other birth controls that work by using hormones is it alters our hormonal cascade, and most of them stop ovulation and so that we can't get pregnant. There's just so much information, misinformation, in even the medical field about what happens because told like when we take hormonal birth control that we still get our period, and we actually don't get our period. We have a withdrawal bleed if we're on hormonal birth control. And the difference is that true menstruation only happens after ovulation, and it's a natural process, and ovulation takes place, and then our body makes a corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum is a temporary estrogen gland that creates progesterone, and progesterone is dominant throughout the second half of our cycle, which sustains our uterine lining, and it's for gestation, but it's also necessary for bone density and brain health and mood and all of these things. And so, yes, there are definitely studies out there. I would suggest looking into them about how taking hormonal birth control, it changes our pheromones, and it changes the way that we smell other people and are attracted to them. And that in this study that I read, I hope I can find it and send it to you, but
Okay,
it
yeah.
says that women are typically, when they're on birth control, attracted to men who are, like, more feminine. And so a lot of women will find that they're, on birth control for many years, and they're with a mate, and they think everything is going great, and they get off the birth control because they wanna have a baby, and then they get off the birth control and they realize that they don't like the man's smell and they're not actually attracted to them. And of course, this is not like an end all be all, like happens to every couple. Um, but it's definitely a phenomenon that's out there. And when you think about it, I mean, hormones, they are dictating so much of our mood, our energy, our organ health, and just we don't they're so subtle, but also in this really powerful way that I know for me, like, at certain times of my cycle, like, I don't even know, I just think I'm crazy, like, I'm like this all the time, like, before I
So dumb.
bleed, like,
It's
you
so dumb.
know
Like, why? Why is like, I forget, I have to be reminded all the time. I'll start crying. I'm not a crier, you know me, and I'll start crying, and then I'll be like, "Oh," or one of my friends, "Are you gonna be, getting your period soon?" And I'm
Mhm,
like, "Oh my god, yes, I'm on my period, I'm crying.
mhm,
I don't know why I'm crying."
yeah,
Yeah, it's wild to me, and how we
yeah,
forget, that just
mhm,
happened 3 weeks ago, like, it's not like it was 5 years ago,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly, for real, I know. I I am like, when I'm about to bleed, like, everyone knows, like, I'm extremely weepy. I can just cry, and it's not even always tears of sadness, it can be tears of joy, it can be, like, just feeling the weight of the world, and then, like, also a couple years ago, I tuned into, like, right before I bleed, I, like, wanna watch, like, true crime stories and, like, murder mysteries, and, like, no other time in my cycle do I wanna watch movies that, like, are shedding blood, you know?
Oh my
I'm just
god, that's so funny.
I
You're like
need
you're like,
to
"Me
see it.
too, me too." No, I do not do that, by the way, however, that's so funny. I mean, serendipitous, I guess.
Mhm,
Yeah. Thank you for answering that question. And one other thing that came up while you were saying that was how when women are on the copper IUD, it's causing inflammation in their bodies, and that's what's killing sperm. I did not know that.
mhm.
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
it's a stopper, mhm. And it's still, I mean, in a lot of ways, if, like, somebody is gonna use birth control, like, it still is one of the best methods if somebody needs an easy to use method that there's such a little, like, users can't fail that, like, you can't skip your pill or forget to put the patch on or whatever, like, it's already there and it's doing its thing. So, in regards to that, I mean, we've come a long way with medical technology. I wish that women didn't have to take on the brunt of the birth control, but we
Yes.
do, um, because men have been studied for birth control before, and it just doesn't go well because men don't wanna gain weight or, like, lose their hair or deal with all the side effects that women have to deal with, even though they're fertile 365 days a year, every day of a woman's cycle, and a woman is only fertile, 6 to 8 days per cycle. But
But you're saying
if
logically it would make more sense for men to be on birth control because every day they're fertile, and
exactly,
we're only fertile a quarter of the time, pretty much, or
exactly.
a
Yeah,
fifth of the time,
mhm,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a bunch of crap, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we have been given the shit end of the stick in a lot of ways, but, you know, at the end of the day, we have to be responsible for our bodies, and I think, you and I were both on birth control in different times of our lives, and so it's not one of those things that I tell women, like, "Never do it," but it's definitely really important in these times to find people who have studied this outside of the medical industrial complex because the medical industrial complex is not really giving all of the information. I mean, I went to an appointment with my daughter who's 17 the other day in a clinic to support her. And I was just pretty baffled by what the midwife was telling her about how, certain birth controls you take, they will stop your period, and that's okay because a period isn't necessary. And I'm just there sitting there thinking, like, a period is absolutely necessary if you understand that that's the only way that your body makes progesterone and that you need that for bone and brain health and mood and so many other natural body cycles. And I was just really grateful that I could go into the office with my daughter from a very informed standpoint and give her the information in a really gentle way and not necessarily telling the doctor that she's wrong, but also trying to expand the awareness around that really outdated information.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, it's wild
birth
that that would
control.
even how could that even be I mean, this could be a whole nother the next time the next time we have a conversation, I feel like this would be a great topic because, yeah, modern day approach is off on a lot of things.
Totally. I mean, women weren't even like we have like maybe 25% of the studies in the medical field done about women because it's really hard to pin women down because of our menstrual cycle and the effect that hormones have on our bodies is just really unique and it's always fluctuating. But even when birth control was created originally, the women were given the hormonal birth control pills every day and they would not bleed, and women were freaking out because they would think they were pregnant even though they weren't, but we're so used to bleeding to know, like, cyclically that we're not pregnant, and so that's when the sugar pills were introduced so that at the last part of the cycle, the last week, you take the hormonal birth control for 3 weeks, and then for a week, you take the sugar pills, and that's when the uterine lining separates from the uterus, and then you have what is called a withdrawal bleed. And essentially, that's just withdrawing from the hormonal birth control. It's not, it's not period that happens after ovulation. And so, yeah, like the technology that's been created and how it's gone about, and oh my gosh, just getting really deeply into the systems around it and the politics and like it's mind-blowing, and I think when I dive deeply into understanding the history of these things about hormonal birth control, how it started, that the Catholic Church had this information for so long and was, like, not giving it to women because women were not capable of, in their minds, tracking their menstrual cycle, and so then we get these pills, and we've been experimented on for decades, women dying, all of these things. Um, and just the amount of fucking money that's made off of this industry. That to me, I mean, I just it makes me go more deeply into not wanting to engage in that.
I mean, we talk on this podcast often about these types of things and how it's just there are a lot of people that are making money off of things that are harming people. And we've also talked a lot about women and how they're not tested on as often, and even for like
Mhm,
birth control and things that are meant for women, oftentimes men are being studied for for drugs that aren't even meant for men, which doesn't make any logical sense. Yeah,
totally.
we could go on and on about it. And
Mhm.
I'm happy that we had this conversation, and I'm grateful that you showed up today and that you shared all of your wisdom with us. And I look forward to chatting with you again and love to have you come back sometime and we can think on some other topics because I feel like it's just endless.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for pushing my edges and inspiring me and asking those subtle questions like, "Really? You need, 3 weeks to have a one-hour phone conversation?" And getting me scheduled sooner because I do really appreciate sharing wisdom, and I just appreciate you being curious about it and having the courage to create a podcast, and share it with the world. So thank you. You inspire me.
Love you.
Love you too.